In live. Excellent. All right, so we've got everything teed up, and welcome to another great edition of Account Based Friday with Megan and I. Megan and I were just talking about this. We've been doing this for over a year now, and we keep getting great speakers. We've got another great speaker today, Amanda Malko, coming from Atlanta. If you haven't heard or met Amanda, she's the CMO of G2, and G2 has become a really popular site for peer reviews. And interestingly enough, this week's poll is about peer reviews. We talked, actually, the question that I was asking was the relevancy of peer reviews. And I was curious myself, like I'm not part of the peer review community. Megan and Amanda obviously have a lot more experience on the analyst side and kind of analyzing things. But I was curious what kind of impact they were having, especially from a buyer perspective. I know from the vendor perspective, they can be important. In fact, that's why I voted the way I did. But to my surprise, the buyers are really tuned in to the impact to their decisions of this particular poll. But Megan, based on your experience, what was your read on this, out of curiosity?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, everybody looks at reviews, whether you're choosing where to go to dinner or what movie to watch or what thing to buy, and then no surprise, it carries over to B2B decisions. You really want that feedback. And for many years, I think we've understood the importance of capturing and providing that peer feedback. Only in the last few years has it been so much easier to do that, thanks to Amanda and others who provide service. So I think I'm not surprised, but definitely happy to see it too, because also I think it's a really important source. You're not doing your homework if you haven't looked at reviews.
Awesome. And then Amanda, thank you again for joining us as CMO of G2. What obviously this is probably good news to you and seeing this, but I'm curious, what's your view or what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were talking before we hopped on here, and it's like Megan said, we're doing this already in our personal lives, and I think we've long in B2B relied heavily on word of mouth. I mean, I know I have for a while now, relying on peers and asking them, hey, what are you using? How did this work for you? And so now peer review sites are just giving us a place to do that more readily and at scale, but it's not necessarily changing behavior, it's enabling behavior that was there all along. And so I think that's an important distinction. We did a study in September, the study came out, and we used a third party to really understand how our buyers using peer review sites, and 86% of them said they're looking at peer review sites when they make their decisions. So your poll is sort of backing up what we know to be true, which is the majority of software buyers are using them. The other interesting thing, and maybe more interesting thing that came out of it, was 85% of enterprise buyers said they're using them. And so I think there was a, even in some of the discussions we have with customers of who's really using this, is it just the small business buyer? And really it's everybody now. And it's, probably not a surprise. Reviews are ubiquitous in our personal lives. We don't necessarily change just when we go to make B2B decisions.
Yeah, I wanted to add in one thing here that I think is really important in the peer review space. That is using it to help you understand how to improve your product. So we always talk about the buyer's journey, and obviously I'm very interested in the buyer's journey, but it's really good for finding out what you need to fix.
That's such a good point. And I think we think about it as a marketing thing. And so it's like that last mile where it gets really powerful is exactly what you said, John. It's like, no, it's the voice of your customer, and it's real time and scalable. And by the way, you can also see it about your competitors. So like pros and cons, what do they like about me and not like about me? And what is my competitor doing that I don't do well? But how does that get translated to the product team, and are they using it? I think that's, if it's a marketing thing, does that really happen?
Yeah, but so if we go sort of the in-between space and talk about application for ABM, marketers alone, absent the product marketers, absent the product management and development team, can at least use it to say, oh, I need to address this in my messaging because it's something that my target audience is going to be looking at, and I better be upfront that I've seen the same thing, and here are the answers I've prepared to your questions in that regard. So I think it's just incredibly powerful, huge resource.
John, I completely agree with you. I think it's actually an untapped resource for many companies. And one of the things we were talking about as we were preparing for the conversation today is the role of reviews and customer feedback in a product-led growth go-to-market, right? And that's where, you've got to make that connection between what are people saying about your tool, because and it can be kind of an early warning system, I think, in a product-led growth model in particular, to say, if I'm not paying attention to how we're trending, then I may not pick up on clues that are going to show up in my revenue stream later.
Yeah, so I would just put that just back into the marketer's head and say, well, how are you thinking about this? How can you use it? How do you get value? Why is it important to invest in this? And I would say the most important reason is to have this window into the market that really gets you a set of insights that are hard and expensive to get in other ways. It's a huge resource for that.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking, is like market research, expensive endeavor. If you can really invest in reviews and hopefully some sort of an always on review flywheel so that you're constantly collecting that feedback and then you actually use it, it's really powerful. And I will say, this is a competitive advantage for your product, for your marketing, to just do this really well, because I don't see everybody do it really well. So if you can capture that feedback, to Megan's point, it is sort of the canary in the coal mine. You can fix things faster. You can address pain points in the market faster. You can address it in your messaging, as John said. And I don't see everybody doing this. So you can have a leg up if you do it well.
So Amanda, a question for you, kind of on that point. When you see marketers making really good use of it, what are some of the hallmarks and best practices of the people who get the most from their engagement with reviews?
I think a couple of things, and I'm curious what others might say. From my vantage point, it's really using reviews in a way across your entire go-to-market. So, and I would start with the way you capture reviews. They're capturing reviews in a way that's automated. They're not sort of cherry picking the feedback, because then frankly, it's not that useful for you if you're not scaling it. And it's also a lot more time intensive. So if you can kind of get review generation as part of your motion, for example, if you're a PLG company, can you put that in-app? There's a lot of ways to do that so that you can kind of pull your customer experience. Not only are you getting the feedback, but you're also able to reap the benefits of the advocacy from that feedback. And then they're using the feedback that they're getting in their content for their demand generation. They're using it to have testimonials. If you have a sales-led motion, to be able to use that content with your sales team as well. You've got all these great testimonials based on what industry are you in, what segment of the business are you in, that you can really arm your sales team with. And then they're hopefully using it to actually improve the product as well. And so I think the best companies, and then of course, buyer intent signals, like there's a great, signal of demand happening on these review sites that you can actually use to reach more of the right kinds of buyers. So I think when you do it well, you're hopefully spending less time on generating reviews because you figured out how to create that review flywheel, and more on what to do with that across your entire go-to-market. Maybe a long answer, but I'm sure, John, you have thoughts on this too.
Well, I want you to go in deeper to how to create that flywheel. So how have you seen the review request process best embedded in marketing motions, in PLG motions, in sales motions, so that it becomes an automatic part of the muscle memory and not like oh yeah, and please try to get
that. Which is so painful, right? Nobody wants to be like, okay, I got to get my emails out. I think the best thing, yes, you can do review campaigns, but I think the best companies do it like a couple of things. Doing it in app, I love when I see it. I don't see it that often, but it's not, honestly, it's not that hard to do. It does require cross-functional alignment depending on who owns that within the product experience. But can you create in-app notifications to generate reviews? It's literally like it's the channel for your customer where they're using the product. It makes a lot of sense, obviously, for many reasons. And then also in the CS motion, so your customer success teams, like I assume most people are doing surveying, they're doing NPS surveys. Can you use that as a moment to also capture reviews and kind of embedding it within that experience? So there is a number of ways to do it, but I think automating it within the CS motion and then within the product is one of the best places to do it. And if you have an advocacy program, great way to embed that within your advocacy community if you have one.
I think Linda just joined us here, and Linda had a couple questions in chat that just popped up. One being related to what you just mentioned about the integration on app. I don't know, Linda, do you want to ask your question? Come off mute, or do you want us?
Oh, sure. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Amanda. Just curious if, what the percent is in terms of people that are incented to complete reviews, or how that works.
Yeah, so it depends on how many, it depends on the company, honestly. Like I was at MailChimp before G2, and we, MailChimp kind of had its PLG flywheel. We didn't incentivize reviews, but I think it depends on the state of the business. If you're really just getting started with the reviews, you may find that does, providing some sort of value exchange does aid the review generation. I mean, usually providing a value exchange of some kind can be helpful when you're getting started. I think the in-app question that you had, Linda, yes, it would be an integration. So for example, G2 integrates with Pendo, Medallia, Delighted, like a number of the companies you might use to do in-app notifications and messaging. There, you could also do email integration. So if you're sending like an NPS score, you could, and that's an automated survey, you could think about this as part of more of the email marketing automation as opposed to in-product experience, where you may not have an integration or want to go to your product team and ask for that, depending on, again, who owns that within the company.
And just so I'm clear, is the in-app integration with the messaging tool that you mentioned, or directly with the app and G2, between our, let's say, our software and G2?
Well, yeah, it would be directly within. So in this example, if you're using Pendo to provide messaging or notifications within the experience, you would want to integrate Pendo with G2, and you could do a push for review generation within your messaging. So that's where the integration would happen.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned,
And they're relatively easy to set up. It's just getting on the roadmap to do it is, I know, oftentimes the challenge.
You mentioned a lot of interesting things there, intent data being one, and that's been a hot topic for several weeks, obviously with John here and just the buyers overall. We've seen a lot of buyers getting more and more sources of intent data as signals to figure out who that buying committee is. What kind of trends are you seeing there, or how are you guys using intent as a product to others out in the market?
So question really around like buyer intent trends in general.
Sure.
I think, well, I'll talk about, and I don't know if tell me if this doesn't get your exact question, but I will say we did a survey recently of our customer base and prospects as well, really B2B marketers. And we find that those who are using intent data are using, over half of them are using multiple sources of intent data, which I think is fantastic. By the way, I think that the more you can think about what signals work for your business at different stages of the funnel and get smarter about that, like I believe that is core to the future of B2B. And then there's the rest of the group that really isn't using buyer intent data right now. And so I think when you think about where it is in the maturity curve for marketers, we're still early on. And I think one of the big barriers to using it is just knowing how. And so we see that once you kind of figure out how to use intent data, it can be really powerful, and you start to think about using multiple sources of intent data, which I think is where it can work really, really well for your business. So I don't know if that answered your question on trends. We do use it at G2 as well. Of course, we sell it as a product, but it's super powerful for any demand gen marketer to be thinking about where are my buyers and what kind of signals can I pick up? Because the website used to be our front door, right? And now it's really marketplaces, review sites. Like the front door is no longer our website. So we need to be really smart about how we're picking up signals and being able to go after the right buyers, especially in this climate where our ad dollars need to go a lot further. How can we be even more laser focused on who we're going after?
I want to build on that a little bit more. I mean, it's really interesting, depending on the background of, I think, of how a marketer's career has evolved. You see sort of predilections to use new kinds of tools in different ways. So we talked a little bit about, using G2 in your marketing motion versus in your, your product intelligence motion. When we start talking about intent, obviously there's been huge kind of adoption for marketing. Not so much yet in customer marketing, that is post-sale marketing, and certainly not so much coming out of the community that really uses NPS. So we'll talk about customer success and all that kind of thing. But imagine if you could tell when your client is looking at a solution that competes with you. To me, peer reviews are a huge intent resource for customer loss, for problems with the customer. And so with respect to this question of different sources of intent, I would say it's probably helpful to think about what exactly can you learn best from what source. For certain use cases, you want to add sources together. For others, you need particular sources to help you with that. And so I would think pre-sales, I would think product development, I would think customer success, retention, renewal kinds of things, and make sure you get the sources that you need to do all those things well as you go up the maturity kind of ladder.
Yeah, it's a great point. I feel like people think it's magic when I talk about how you could use it for CS and retention. It's like, it's not magic. You can literally say, here's my buyer intent source. If my buyer is looking at someone who I consider a competitor, I want a Slack notification to go, and I want whoever is the CSM to get a notification that, watch out, this person. That is not magic. It is real. You can do that. And it's actually relatively easy once you have the intent data. It's whether you use Slack or not, maybe different question, but it's super powerful. And I think that's such a great point, because it is very prevalent in demand gen motions. I think we're going to see this become core to like how we do post sale, to your point as well.
Yeah, that's music to my ears, because I think in general, there's a lack of sufficient focus on post-sale, right, in marketing. I think because of what most marketing teams are, given incentives to do, which is demand gen mostly. But the fact is, most of the revenue is coming from renewals and cross and upsell of your existing customers. So if that's the reality, wouldn't you want to have those data sources helping you to protect and grow those relationships? So yeah, it's for sure an untapped thing. There's another opportunity for people to get ahead of their competition as well, right? If not everybody's doing it and you do, then you've got an advantage until everyone else catches up, right?
Can we build on that a little bit? Because maybe, Amen, you can help us understand in terms of that kind of innovative thinking around the data source. Where are you seeing that coming from in your client organizations? And are you pursuing relationships with different types of functional people than you might do initially?
And are you specifically referring to customer marketing, and where is that sitting in or post?
Is it customer marketing? Yeah. So who is driving innovative uses inside clients? Is it marketing ops? Is it sales ops? Is it customer marketing? Who is getting it?
Yeah, buyer intent data, it's still happening within the demand gen teams. It's still the lion's share of where it's happening. I would love for it to happen more in customer marketing, but I think customer marketing, I mean, talking about where that is on the maturity curve and where that sits in the organization and how are you even defining it? Like that's probably a separate conversation, John and Megan, for maybe you might have had that conversation already, but we see a lot of different sort of scopes for what customer marketing means within an organization. Sometimes it does include like post-sell, upsell, and sometimes it's really about advocacy. And so I think for buyer intent specifically, we more often see it sitting with demand gen teams. At least that's my perspective. I'd love it to be more prevalent among customer marketers. I'm just not seeing it yet.
Yeah, I mean, what we're looking at is who are going to be the innovators of the future, who is going to see value in data feeds or in other areas, and who's going to step up and say, actually, we should be doing this. So when it comes from marketers, there's a very specific set of KPIs that are involved. But other players within the go-to-market organization have KPIs where data sources can provide really great value. So it sounds like I haven't seen too much uptake. What I'm really tracking that I think is interesting is the interest in things like Gong and Chorus and sentiment in calls, and a lot of progress being made there. Are you starting to see at G2, are you guys seeing interest in your clients to bring your data feed into the sales users viewport?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think sales is a big end user of the intent data. I think one of the friction points in any, including in, like, I would say Gong really sits within sales and CS orgs, and then marketing is now starting to be like, wait a minute, there's actually a lot of intelligence we can use. And so it goes both ways, right? And so I think we absolutely see sales as a core user, because if you're a sales-led organization, those buyer intent signals, they need to be getting to your sales team. And so how you do that, there's a variety of different ways depending on the organization, whether it's in Salesforce, Slack, et cetera. But that is a point of alignment that's required between marketing and sales. That's always tough, right? And so we spend a lot of time educating people on how do you do that well? What would that look like? Do you need integrations? A lot of times you do. But I think the Gong example is an interesting one, where as marketers, I'm like, we should probably be, who's the marketer just going to raise their hand and be like, here's what I learned from Gong and how I like changed my go-to-market messaging pitch based on what I learned from there. I'm sure there's a lot more insights that we could leverage as marketers from the tools that our sales teams are using.
I have the mental model of your intent data being kind of a bottom of the funnel, really, really effective at the bottom of the funnel, where I would think sales would play a very key role there in wanting to understand what's happening. Is my mental model off, or like where else are you seeing it? Are you seeing it at the top of the funnel too, or is it, throughout?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's definitely, we do see that, I mean, G2 can play a role across the funnel, but I think we find, especially with sales-led companies, the most success in the bottom of the funnel, like especially looking at actual time to follow through on those signals. We do see that it's so close to the point of purchase that you need to action on them quickly for that to be, have the kind of ROI lift that we do see with customers who use it successfully. That's not to say that it can't play a role in the top of the funnel, but I think, G2 is really, someone called it purchase intent. Like, this is a customer who is going to buy. It's super, if you start anywhere with buyer intent, I actually say start at the bottom of the funnel. These are literally like cherry picked, hot leads, whatever you want to call them, but you do have to make sure that if your, sales team is leveraging them, the SLA on that is important, because they may be imminently making a decision.
What do you see as some of the mistakes people make with review, either sourcing or, using them? What would you say are some of the pitfalls that people run into?
With reviews specifically?
Yeah.
I think a couple of things. One is the one and done. So like, I ran my review campaign and I'm done because we hit our target. Like, I needed 50 reviews and I got them and I'm done. It's just so painful later, right? Because recency matters. I mean, forget whether it matters in the algorithms. For us, it does. But as a buyer, like, think about going on and you haven't seen a review from this company in 6 months. You're kind of like, okay, that matters as you're doing your discovery. And it's also painful to just like, okay, now we got to do a review campaign. So thinking about how do you create an always on strategy versus a one and done, that's one of the pitfalls we see. I think one of the other ones is only really hand curating the 5-star reviews only. Not only is that painful as a marketer, buyers don't actually need that. They don't want that. If you go to Amazon and you see something has fewer reviews, but only 5 stars, and then you see one that has like twice the reviews and it's like 4.5 stars, I don't know. I'm going for the one that has 4.5 stars and twice the reviews. I feel like it's been more vetted. So there's a trust element to it. And so sometimes I think we make our jobs harder striving for that perfection. You don't actually need it. And so
hold on that thought. I think that's a profound thought, and it's really scary that volume is the important thing.
It's a balance for sure. It's a balance. But it is a balance between volume, recency, and favorability, right? And so I think Amazon, because we all experience that so much in our personal lives, is a great example. You just think about what matters to you as you're going through those reviews. But yeah, I'm curious why it's scary to you, John. I think it's scary because it's like, oh, we got to do all those things. But I think the good news is you don't have to have everything be 5 stars, and that's not necessary to succeed.
So yeah, I think it's scary because the path to getting volume is, as you said, always on. And if this this task set is not properly assigned and resourced, then you can't do it. So now you can't get to volume such that your 4s and 5s are a majority. And the fear is that, well, you could get 3s and 2s and things. And so now your volume could be working against you because you haven't hit a critical mass of volume. So what's scary is the truth, if it's the truth, right? And you can't get to the truth without driving volume, but on the way, there might be bad news.
Yeah, it's sort of letting go of the control. If you want to lean into customer voice, that is part of it, right? That is part of it. But I think, I think there's a way to really leverage. Once you create, you're going to have to test and learn. I think that's the scary part, is the testing and learning part as you get there. I think that in B2B, we're moving more towards a B2C environment, like an e-commerce for B2C. And we're going to start to see that this becomes just so prevalent in the way that we buy. We're going to be buying more online, buying more from marketplaces. And so I think we're going to have to, get more comfortable with the reviews in the same way that B2C products have had to do for quite a while. And there's a lot of testing and learning that comes from that.
Yeah, that is a big piece. The digital transformation in buying is happening. Better get on board with it.
I will say the people who got on board early in e-commerce, wow, are they light years ahead of everybody else? So what can we learn from that in B2B? Start early.
Excellent. Well, I think we're just about at time here. Megan, any closing thoughts on your side?
Just a big thank you. This is a great conversation, a great topic, and I think really timely, for a lot of marketers, especially as we're going into sort of summer budgeting and planning and thinking about, how we want to bring intent and reviews and customer voice kind of into our work. So definitely appreciate you joining us and sharing some good advice.
Absolutely. It was great to chat with you all. Nice to meet you, John.
And Amanda, you have an event coming up, you said, in Chicago at the end of the month. Is that a public facing event?
Yes, June 28th. Happy to share a link. But if you're in Chicago on June 28th, it's going to be a great event with the CMOs of Active Campaigns, Sprout Social, and 6 Sense. So
excellent.
Pretty great lineup.
Well, thank you for investing time this morning with us. And next week, we were talking about customer marketing here earlier, and coincidentally, the chief customer officer of Lean Data owns customer marketing, and she owns CX as well. So Rachel McBrady will be joining us next Friday morning from California, and she'll be sharing kind of her experience and what she's seeing across her clients as well. So it should be a really good conversation. So thanks again, Amanda, for joining us.
Thanks for the chat. Enjoyed it.
All right.
Thanks, guys.